Well, hello everybody. My good friends at Excess Power batteries, and supercapacitors, once again opened up the, hey, BBI, we need you to help our company out one more time. And I said, for this, I'll do anything. This box has showed up here in the mail today, courtesy of them, and I cannot wait to get in it. So let's go ahead and pop this open, because if what I think is in here, we're in for all a rude awakening. Beauty. It's totally in the eye of the beholder. Gentlemen, I bring you the next level in battery is. Let's get on with the show. Okay, so my job here today is to help explain these new little wonderful gifts and gels from heaven, the lithium power cells from Excess Power. So for decades and decades and decades, those of us that have been in the heavy hitting, heavy amperage consumption world, and it doesn't matter in the DC world, it doesn't matter if you're car audio, big CB, doesn't matter. We've had this problem. It's a burden, it's a curse, it's overbearing, it's constantly present. And I'm here to tell you that we finally got the solution to the problem. And the problem is that most of your equipment runs best at 14 volts. The problem is out there in the universe, they don't make a 14 volt battery. They don't even make a 13 volt battery, they make a 12.5. So you have this problem. You're going to put a ton of batteries in your vehicle to help support the electrical system. And you got two choices on getting that voltage up. Choice number one is get a 12 volt and a 6 volt battery, series them up so that you get 18 volts, and then run a bunch of them in parallel to get more amperage. And then use a very small alternator to charge that battery bank, and then utilize the fact that when the amperage load hits, because most lead acid batteries are just garbage, they can only outrush a couple hundred amps, that voltage is going to dip real hard and it's going to fall down around 16, 15 volts. Option number two, you buy a bunch of stuff like this. Okay. You go get like 5 of these and strap them underneath the hood of your truck and get the external voltage control unit and run the voltage up. Well, you're giving up a great deal of amperage trying to push those 12 volt batteries you've got in your vehicle past the 12, 14 volt range, and you push it up to 16, and then you pray when it hits the load it stays somewhere around 14. Well, a couple years ago, I came out and was able to share with all of you guys supercapacitor technology. Now, the supercaps weren't new to the industry. I just gave everybody a new way of thinking about it. How a supercapacitor could act as a supplemental ability to store current and deliver it on demand. It is not a long-term storage option. It is a short-term storage option with a very quick outrush option. Well, there's nothing new about lithium cells. They've been around for a long time. There's a lot of guys in the lithium industry, the lithium car world, audio world, that have been building their own cells out of, stuff that they bought out of a junkyard, basically, or they're buying off eBay. The problem with that is those cells, you don't know the condition of the cells. You don't know if the car was in a wreck. You don't know how well the cells are maintained. You don't know what the life of the cells are. You don't know if they're at the beginning, middle, or end of their life. You don't know if the balancing boards, which are going to help compensate for the middle to end of life or impact or damage to the cells, you don't know if those balancing boards are working correctly. Most guys don't even bother using balancing boards. You don't know. You don't know. So you have this line in the sand. It's at 12.5 volts. And it's actually 12.3, 12.2, somewhere in there. Actual resting voltage of most batteries when they're used for a little while. And you know that your equipment's going to run much better. My guys in the radio world, they like to run all their equipment around 15 volts. Why? Because after you go through all the loss of all the different connectors and the wire length and the terminals, by the time it gets down to the actual component itself at 15 volts, it drops to about 13, 9, 14 volts. A lot of loss. Well, today we're here to talk about the answer to all of those questions and all of those problems. And the first thing I want to talk about is series parallel. This is your individual 3.2 volt cell from excess power. They have two versions. They have the 35 amp hour and the 40 amp hour. I chose the 35 amp hour. Yes, it's less amperage, but this cell lends itself more to the ability to be able to get rid of the current, outrush. The outrush ability of the cell is slightly higher than the 40 amp. Now this is 35 amps for an hour before you see voltage drop. Think about that for a minute. You're going to put a 35 amp load on this cell at 2.3 volts, and it's going to hold that for an hour before it starts to dissipate. Let's go over some of the parameters of this cell real quick. So these are a 22C roughly cell, which is middle to the high end of the cells out there in the market share. This particular cell. Now burst, they're as high as 35C. And if you want to get into the C rating, enjoy that, have fun, go get confused, get on the confuser and Google, and you're going to be, what? I'm not going to bother getting into that. Constant load, you're looking at about a 10C. Pulse, on average, you're looking at 22. Peak is about 30C out of each one of these cells. So the amperage ability of this is truly breathtaking. The problem that we've had with a lot of lithium cells, like I just did a huge solar system install for one of my friends, and he used the rare, incredibly expensive Vectron solar cells, which are great. Problem with those is you can't let them get too cold and you can't let them get too hot, or otherwise the cell's garbage. Well, that was my very first question. Oh, my second question. First question was cost. Second question was, what's our temperature rating? Knowing full well I can't go out and do a video like this recommending it for my guys to go and use this and then tell them, okay, you can get rid of all of your lead acid batteries that you don't have to have in a perfect little safe environment, and we're going to replace them with these things, but then you've got to keep them warm, keep them dry, keep them freaking cool, keep them... These things are water resistant. Like, you can build the cell, throw it in the water. It is water resistant. And they asked me to make a big point about the water resistance. Okay? Lead acid battery, you get it in the water, it's done. AGM battery, pretty quick, it's done. These are water resistant. Now, you guys in the boat community, this is not the right thing for you for a couple different reasons. I would lend myself to believe that if they put it in a prepackaged container that is watertight, that would make it more for your conditions than something that is submerged in epoxy. That way that you don't have the weight of the cells hanging on these posts. It would be more for your guys' condition. But for the way the car audio guys are, who like to build all their own stuff, and they've got banks and banks and banks of supercapacitors, this is your answer right here. Each one of these cells is about $55 to $57 a piece, this cell. But if you think about that in the overall cost for a decent lead acid battery that is going to be able to even remotely compete, this is going to blow your mind when you see how much current we can pull out of these little cells. It's actually relatively cheap, especially when we're talking about millions of cycles of charge and discharge versus a couple 100,000 at the most with the lead acid battery. There's no maintenance with this. There's no nothing. Assemble, install, be done. You check it every once in a while to make sure shit hasn't rattled loose, especially if you're in your car audio world. Each cell is approximately 8.5 inches long, and that's from post to post. And our cross terminal width is about 2.5 inches roughly. I can get out dial calipers and give you exact measurements, or you can go to Excess Power's webpage and pull the data sheet and look it up your guys' selves. So, okay, there are two different terms that the car audio guys have got down pat. Most of my DC guys, the way they use them, they've got this down pat. So just bear with me. I'm coming at this as from the point of view that I am explaining this to a beginner who's never dealt with any of this stuff before. So the terms that I'm going to use, I'm going to explain them, and it's not because I'm thinking you guys are not smart. It's that I want to make sure that the guy that's watching this video and has never dealt with these before doesn't hurt himself or damage the cells. First thing I want to tell you is that the torque limit on each one of these posts is 7-inch pounds. Do not use an impact to install these. They'll work for a hot minute, but what you're doing is you're stretching the post out on the inside of the cell itself, and it's going to damage it. Just a little bit is the way it was described to me. Basically, it's a little bit over finger tight. Do not use an impact. Do not use an impact. They'll laugh at you when you call them and say, well, I assembled it and the cell failed, and then they have you send the cell back and they're going to look at me like, no, you over tightened it and destroyed the battery. It's your fault. Do not use an impact. Do not over tighten. I cannot stress this enough. Okay, 7-inch pounds. This bolt, which is provided by them, you are going to install it with a 3/4 of an inch socket. Be very careful where you put your very conductive, make things go boom, ratchet in assembly process. Mind what you do. Be aware of what you're doing. Assemble this in a quiet environment, not with a bunch of people talking around, being around, asking you questions. Everybody's got their fingers in the pie. Be safe, work smart. Now, everything comes with a label on it from Excess Power. That's great. I want you to get your voltmeter out and put it on DC volt check and not just take the labels for granted in assemblage. This is dangerous. If you choose to assemble one of these yourself, verify, test and verify. That means remove your caps. These are your thread protectors that will come installed on these cells. Remove your thread protectors. Grab your positive and your negative leads on your volt tester and verify that this is actually ground and this is actually hot. Resting voltage, 2.2 volts. Now, in shipping, they have to send these batteries almost completely depleted. They have to, for safety reasons. This isn't an option. This is a must. So when you receive the battery, that means you're going to have to put it through its charge regime and get it charged up. Let's take a minute. Let's talk about balancing boards. Balancing boards are very handy in maintaining even charge rate across all the cells. A balancing board looks at the current coming into the battery, and it's monitoring the voltage on each one of the cells. It breaks up each one of the individual cells and says, okay, we're going to send a little bit more current to this one and less current to this one, and we're going to try and push this cell up and balance it. That's very handy if you have old lithium. Now I'm of the opinion that because this lithium is new, I'm not going to worry about balancing boards today. The balancing board end of this situation falls solely on your shoulders if you want to use them or not. Me personally, I'm not going to bother with balancing boards. Not overly concerned with it today, for today's video. In the overall spectrum of things, I have to, for safety's sake, make a point that balancing boards are a good thing. I'm not using them. That's my choice and that's my liability. Okay, all the disclaimers aside, the other thing I want to talk about is series in parallel. Car audio guys know series in parallel well with coming to wire in speakers. My DC guys, the way they vulgarly abuse the DC universe, and I love them for it, by the way, because I think it's great, also understand series and parallel. For the newcomer to the game, I want you to think back to when you're about 2 or 3 years old and you were figuring out batteries in the remote for your brand new car, remote control car, or your brand new toy, or your play, whatever it is, and how you were having to stack up little AA or AAA batteries or D-cell batteries, and how one end head was positive and the other was negative, and if you applied them in series in the back of your controller, radio, boombox, whatever, you were increasing your voltage. It's the same principle that we're going to do here. So first you identify what your terminals are supposed to be, and then you verify through testing what they actually are. Visually identified. Now we are going to verify. If I hook my leads up backwards on my fluke, you see the little hash mark on the fluke up here, showing up here in the corner? That means the poles are reversed. But I'm verifying that the labels are good. I also have to approach this with the point of view that there's going to be people that are going to watch this video that don't necessarily have excess power cells. And they're going to use what I say to assemble their own product. So to allow me to sleep at night, this is the sequence of events that I'm going to teach. Visually identify, then test and verify. This is your big, thick, beefy shorting bar that you get from excess power. You have to have substantial amount of metal as your transfer bar because of the amount of current that is going to go from A to B. Little thin aluminum strap like this that you go buy at Ace, Coast to Coast, Home Depot won't do the job. There's not enough metal mass to be able to adequately carry the amount of current that this is going to have implied upon it. That little thin piece of aluminum, even though it looks fairly thick, it will get very hot and act as a resistor. Use substantial amount of metal. Now we're working on this end of the capacitor, or pardon me, keep thinking I'm trying to explain supercapacitors. We're working on this end of the battery, these two terminals. So I'm going to isolate this terminal up here for safety reasons with the thread cover, which is going to guard it against if we accidentally drop the wrench on it, which would be bad. You're going to have an explosive, violent reaction that's going to take place. The installation of your transfer bar is this simple. Once again, do this by hand. For the maximum amount of safety, do this by hand. Now, if you really wanted to, you could put yourself a lock washer in here. I strongly suggest that you use a star washer. Do not use a spring-loaded cut crush washer. Do not do it. That's the washer that's got a cut in it and one edge is sitting a little bit higher than the other. To properly compress this size of a crush nut lock washer, spring-loaded lock washer, will be more than the inch-pounds of rating for the load. What we're shooting for when we go to tighten these is about that much. Just a hair over hand tight. It could be said that you might want to use a little bit of, like Loctite on this. It could be said. I'm not suggesting it. I'm just saying it could be said. Now, by us tying these two cells together in series, let's once again test and verify. Ground, positive. We've now created a 4.5 volt battery. We're going to take this cap out of the equation. We're going to set it aside. Let's grab another lithium cell. Let's verify what we're doing. Positive or negative, positive. Remove our cap cover, lay it down. Remove our thread guard cap cover, verify. 2.4 volts. Let's grab another transfer bar, shorting bar. Let's put it into play. Let's cover this lead back up. Let's assemble by hand. There's a huge amount of electrical potential here. Huge. It's like I said in the supercapacitor video, we are building a bomb, for a lack of a better way to describe it. You short the terminals out on this, you are going to have a very violent reaction. Now, because the cells are round, it allows us to be able to make the battery in any shape or form that we want. We could continue this on and make it into a giant C. We could make it break back this direction if we wanted to. You could hide this almost anywhere. I strongly suggest that you do not put this in a sealed enclosure that is completely airtight without any venting. Just suggesting. And where you have access to it so you can check it for safety reasons. All right. Once again, leaving our cap cover on. We're now identifying negative, positive. For video demonstration purposes, we're going to assemble this thing flat. But you could literally make it any way you want. Once again, we're now going to test and verify. Do not use an impact. Don't even use like this kind of thing. Get all the little adapters handy for this. Don't be stupid and do this kind of job either. Don't do this. Unsafe, unnecessary, and will damage the battery. Do it by hand. This is normally where if I wasn't doing this for a major customer and I know 1 million people are going to take 1,000 looks at this, where I'd make some comment about pretend it's some body part or something and manipulate it by hand. But we're going to keep this G-rated because that's the way we're going to roll. 7 inch-pounds, you guys. 7 inch-pounds. I'm going to finish this out. We'll be back. We've finished our assembly, and we've taken and we've seriesed 6 cells. This should get us roughly in the 13 volt range. Let's remove our thread protectors, our terminal caps, and let's verify that by testing. 13.5. So the resting voltage, even though these cells are mostly depleted, is 13.5 volts. Now, what they tell me is that these cells in this battery, this is now a battery, okay? There's a huge difference between lead acid and lithium. Lithium are like garbage disposals for charge. They love it. You can put a lot of current to them when you charge. Lead acid batteries, no, they only want a couple hundred amps, if that, for charge, and they're only able to discharge a couple hundred amps at a time. Lithium can give up a whole lot more energy, a whole lot faster. A whole lot more energy, a whole lot faster. This battery here can give up 600 plus amps right now and stay above a 13.5 to 14 volt range. That's with no supplement from charge cycle with your alternator attached, which would boost that even further depending on what the alternator's input charge ability is. So we have a 600 amp plus outrush ability. You have roughly a 350 amp inrush. You can put 350 amps worth of charge on this and not cause hardly any damage or no damage at all to the cell, which is huge. This is a huge step forward. Huge step forward. So we're sitting at 13.5. If we wanted to go to a higher resting voltage, we'd add yet another cell. And that's going to rest around 15 volts. Now remember, fully depleted with this thing, what they consider to be dead is at 12 volts. If you pull past 12 volts on this, this battery is pretty roughly discharged. Your maximum charge on this, for safety reasons, the number I'm going to tell you is 15.8 in this configuration. So if we had yet a 7th cell down here, that would be 17.8 roughly. This is game changing for my guys. This one little battery that you can pick up and hold in one hand, does not weigh hardly anything at all, replaces what, 3 or 4 giant lead acid batteries that the resting volts are a full 2 volts lower. This is and we're talking big cat batteries, big lead acid batteries. We're talking 2.5 inches across. This is the wave of the future. This is the future. The super caps and this are the two most game-changing things that I've come across in my professional career of working in the DC electric field yet. The energy potential, the energy storage, and the ability to dump current from this device, breathtaking change to the industry. So now let's say that we want to do more than 600 amps worth of current draw. Well, how do we achieve that? Since this is called series, the next term that I want to talk about is parallel. This is one battery bank. This is another battery bank. Now we're going to parallel these battery banks to double down on our amperage ability, our amperage storage, our outrush. We've already tested and verified that this is positive, tested and verified this is negative, and also with this bank as well. Let's stand this bank up. Let's bring it so they touch each other. Let's remove our thread caps. Let's hook up our transfer bar. And believe me, I cannot stress to you enough how important it is that you take a minute and you identify what you are working with when it comes to putting the transfer bar on there. If this battery was reversed and you put the transfer bar on wrong, you are going to have an explosion as soon as you do this. Negative, negative. There would be fire from the depths of Haiti itself blowing in our face right now. There's a reason that I'm teaching you visually identify, test, and verify. Remember, once again, low torque, 7 inch-pounds. This is the time where things get a little sketchy when you're taking your wrench and putting it over the top of things. If this wrench makes contact, you are going to have a bad day. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Even in their depleted state. This little battery here, this little 5-inch wide battery. Let me measure this so I can verify out totally with you guys the size of this thing. It is about 15.5 inches long and is 5 inches wide. You can now easily put over 1,000 amp load on this battery, and you're going to have very little voltage sag in comparison to a lead acid standard battery. Let's go ahead and hook up our little voltage clip. And let's hook up our other little voltage clip. We're resting at 13.5 volts. Well, I say we charge it. We're going to have an interesting phenomenon take place here in a minute, guys. I'm going to hook up the bench 1,000 amp supply, and I want you to keep an eye on this meter over here. This is a volt amp meter over here in the corner. It shows what my current resting voltage is on my giant bank of brand new XS, what are these, D7500 series batteries. I've got 8 of them underneath the workbench. Okay. When I bought those batteries, not even 6 months, 7 months ago, this wasn't ready for rollout. Honestly, if I had 4 of these cells, 4 of these battery banks, seriesed up and then paralleled, I could get rid of all of those underneath my workbench. And I just, I'm saddened with the amount of money that I spent on those other batteries. And then I got some giant North Star cell phone batteries underneath there too, which I did not even need to buy. I mean, 3 of these equals 4 of those giant North Star batteries. Just in its ability to store current and its ability to get rid of it. Vastly outperforms those old school batteries that rest at 12.5. The phenomenon that we're going to see is I'm pretty sure that that amp meter is going to read in reverse. Because we're going to parallel this battery bank with the battery bank underneath the bench so we can charge this thing. Okay? It means current's going to run from here back into the battery until I kick on the bench power supply. And we're going to run the power supply up. I have a 1,000 amp power supply, and we're going to inrush as much current into these things as it'll take. Right out the hop. We're going to charge her up to 16 volts. Just like that. Or pardon me, 15.8. 15.8. And we'll see how much current actually gets passed through this wire into the cells to achieve that. What I'm telling you is that if you are installing this into your vehicle system, either you're going to have an isolated battery system, or this is going to surpass, replace, or get rid of your lead acid battery, because its resting voltage is lower than what this battery's voltage is. Think about what I'm saying. Your 12 volt battery that you have in your vehicle now will pull a load out of this battery and will almost completely discharge it, versus us being able to fully charge this, shut the vehicle off, and be able to have a fully charged battery once we get in the vehicle. This is something you need to keep in mind. And that's the easiest way for me to demonstrate it to you, is this way. So I have 2 units of measure. We have the bench voltage meter, amp meter, and then we have the flute clamp over ring. Now we're going to do this pretty quick. This is my positive terminal. We're now pulling an 80, 90 amp in reverse. And our voltage is starting to drop on our battery. So, let's tighten that down. Let's go down here. We're going to adjust our power supply to 15.8 volts. Now we're pushing into this battery now a positive 300 amps, 370 amps. Our battery is at 14.37 volts. Still pulling 300 amps worth of charge, but we're starting to drop. The battery's coming closer to charge. Now, this is going to take a little bit of time. So power supply is down there trying to compensate, and it's pushing it to 16 volts, but we're shooting for 15. This meter's showing us 430 amps. This one's showing us half. So we've got another 100 and something amps going on, trying to push up the supercapacitors plus all the extra batteries underneath there. The only one we're focused on is this here. 240 amps going in. And we're at 14.65. $14.7. $90 degrees, 76 degrees. Still got a full volt to go, you guys. Between the lithium cells, I'm here to tell you, and supercapacitors, there is nothing that we cannot run stably and fully now. Speaking to my radio guys, there's no such thing as a motor mall needed anymore. There's not. This is the wave of the future. Being that it can put up with a negative 35 C storage, there's nowhere in the lower 48 where this is going to get so cold that it's going to damage the battery. And there's nowhere in the lower 48, well, unless you're on the hottest day of the hottest recorded day in history in Death Valley, will this battery be exposed to a hot enough temperature that could possibly cause it damage. There's no such thing. That's breathtaking. Most of the lithium batteries that are out there are finicky, persnickety, pain in the butts. Each one of these banks is roughly around $300, and it's replacing almost $1,000+ worth of equivalent batteries. So you're looking at something roughly about third the cost, with no maintenance, no outgassing, no corroded connections, none of that. Look at it dropping. Look at that dropping. And we're going to go for 15.8. Power supply still trying to compensate too far. Here, 15.8 on the money. Still 150 amps going in. See what are our terminal temperatures up to. 95, 78. Nothing big going on. Now the shunt on the wall over here that runs this shunt is hotter than heck, man. That's 130 degrees. This is a primarily depleted, incredibly hard charge, initial right out the hop. Is this ideally the way that you want to charge it? No, you probably want to put it on a couple amp charge and just let it slowly walk its way up to the top. But we ain't got time for that here. We don't. I'm telling you, before the end of this video, there is going to be flames. There will be fire. I guarantee it. I think I'm going to cut away. And let me grab my cell phone here. And we'll be back when this thing hits 0. So we're at 0.7, 0.6. We're about 14 minutes in. We're going to hit pause. We pushed a hard charge on this battery. Like, this has been very violent and abusive as far as shoving a ton of current into this thing. The cells never got above 75 degrees, 77 degrees, somewhere in there. Never. 77.2. The ambient room temperature is 74 degrees. 75 degrees. So no more than 2 degrees above ambient temperature. Now what I want to do is I want to pull the positive terminal off. And I want the battery to sit for, let's say, 10 minutes, roughly. And I want to come back and I want to measure where the voltage has dropped, if any, on the battery, to give you guys an idea of resting voltage. Because you and I both know that you can push a 12 volt battery. Like right now, I'm pushing all of those batteries up above 12.5 volts to 15.8 to achieve this voltage to charge this battery. But as soon as you take that charge off, it dramatically drops in a very rapid fashion. So we're going to disconnect this terminal. I mean, we're roughly fully charged, even though it's taken half an amp. We don't know if that half an amp is to maintain or if it's actually fully charged at that rate. So we're going to pull this terminal off, we'll let it sit for about 10 minutes, and we'll see what our voltage is going to be sitting at when we're done. Lay that aside, lay that out of the way, make that sure that's out of the way. So we're not pulling any current now. This meter reads 0. Well, here, let's zero this out again. Zero. And let's re-verify. We might be fully charged. A little bit of amperage. About an amp. Okay. Let's pull this off. Charge to 15.8 volts. Our voltmeter here is showing us 15.8. Let's go ahead and let's reset this. We'll start over. And we'll be back in about 10 minutes and we'll see where we sit. So here we are 24 minutes later. Now, what I've been over here doing is making some very basic clamp points. Because we're going to beat the brakes off of this here in a second. And I don't want to beat up my terminals doing this. So this 7/8 of an inch round aluminum bar is the sacrificial animal for the situation. I can still use this terminal as a charge terminal. So let's go ahead and pop this off. This is officially where we stop being nice to you, because my guys aren't going to believe in you until I beat you half to death. Okay, let me explain to you our test rig. Our current ambient air is 72 degrees. We're going to take our clip over amp ring here. We're going to zero it. We're going to wrap it around both of the ground leads off of the battery. This is my 500 amp load cell, which I've set on fire so many times, the voltmeter side of it. Oh, it's working today. Normally it doesn't work. This is a new one. So we have 1,000 amps worth of carbon pile dissipation here. Old clamp, or the old carbon pile, goes to this clamp. The new one goes to that clamp, which is at the back. The new clamp over here attaches here, and the old clamp's on the outside. So they represent an equal amount of draw distance through the same amount of material over the same distance. Our resting voltage, we're approximately a half an hour after we fully charge the battery, is at 15.7 volts. How well is that going to fare? We don't know. This is our actual amp reading. You can take and combine the two. They should be roughly the same. But because remember, this is straight from Chinesium. It's not going to be the most accurate form of measurement. But we're going to hit this thing really hard. I got the Ryobi shop fan over here in the corner that we can click on to stop the flame and fire here in a minute. Now, these both are going to get very hot very quick, and they're going to make a ton of noise. And they're going to say, shut me off, you're overloading me. Yeah, don't care. Your sacrificial lambs, deal with it. So, here we go. $100, $200, $300, $400, $500 amp load off the chart. And there is an additional 500 amp load. So we're pulling over 1,000 amps. This connector is starting to smoke, and we're at 12.75 volts. 1,000 amp constant load. 800 amp, give or take. Oh, we're on fire over here. Oh, this one's on fire too. Recovered, back to 14 volts. So we'll do this again here in just a second. We're going to let everything cool down. Now we're going to go on camera, take a picture of the battery, another picture of the battery, and another picture of the battery, picture of the amp clamps, and a picture of the carbon pile. I'll make sure to put those pictures at the end of this video. So we just pulled 1,000 amps while maintaining a 13 volt load. Not even really touching the maximum draw capability of this battery. Not even coming close. I'm going to let the carbon piles cool off, and we're going to do this again. Now that our resting is at 14.2. We just bled a full volt out of the battery in just a matter of seconds. It feels really warm. That's only 90 degrees. Wasn't too bad. Let's let everything cool off. We'll be right back. Okay, Okay, so the battery has recuperated, if it could have been recuperated. Our load cells are cooled down, and let's go ahead and see what happens now that we're pulling on a partially depleted battery. Now, if we were running in a vehicle, our alternator would have put current immediately back into it, and we're not going to allow it to do that. So let's go ahead. This is going to spark. Ready? Go. 480 amps. Additional 400 amps. 12.4. We're still holding strong. If you think about it, a lead acid battery at this point would have been well past 12 volts in its draw. Pull our load off. Stop it. And we're recovering once again. We have achieved the maximum amount of dissipation we can get. If a lead acid battery had been put through this same regimen, it would have been down at 10 volts or lower. And we maintained above 12 easily. And we've hit this hard. I mean, we've put thousands of amp worth of draw on it for an extended amount of time, which is crazy if you think about it. This is the shit. I'd feel very comfortable running like a 24 pill off of just this battery and an alternator and one supercapacitor. That's craziness. Well, let's charge it back up, and I want to redo our initial test because we initially screwed up. I had to set on AC. So I want to see the maximum amount of dissipation this thing can do, fully charged into both of those, fully cranked over. Okay, we're at 1594, which means we're fully charged. Let's go ahead and pull this out of the equation for now. Let's set it aside. I'll shut down the base or the bench power supply here. Test rig hasn't changed. So here we go. The thumbnail for this video. 13.2, 1,000 amps worth of draw. 13. Voltmeter's starting to fail here. Smoking again. 12.8. What you think about this for a hot minute, you guys? We are on fire. Well, guys, on that note, as we're filling the shop up full of smoke, I just want to say thanks for watching. Big shout out to Excess Power. Once again, you guys, way to bring game-changing technology to the industry. Big shout out to all of you guys, and I thank you all for your support. Hopefully everybody's able to learn from this. Gentlemen, my name is BBI, and I gotta go before I gag to death on smoke. I'll see ya. Bye. That was entertaining. Got all the smoke out of here finally. What you guys couldn't see was above me, the ceiling of smoke was going. Hey, real quick, I'm going to come up with a case to put that thing in, and then I'm going to do a YouTube video on a second segment here in about a week or so from now. We got some bad weather coming up, but give it a week or so when we get some warm weather, and I'm going to show you how to install this in your vehicle, and we're going to discuss having other batteries in the system and how that's negatively going to affect you. And just have faith. Have faith. There's more on this to come. This is just the how to build and violent destruct test. Very impressed with my results I've seen here. Because if you think about it, the way we use it, it's not 1,000 amps constantly under load like that. It's pulses. And I firmly believe that if we marry it with a super cap, this is literally the most unbeatable thing that we've ever come up with a decent alternator as well. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Big shout out to these guys. Big thanks. Big thanks to Excess Power. Gentlemen, I appreciate every single one of you, and we'll see you. Bye-bye.